modern game industry is an international market, with publishers signing contracts with designers around the world, and more importantly, licensing games back and forth with publishers around the world. You can't see everything in every place, no matter how much you try, but by having game licenses, you can broaden your reach, either by bringing a game into market, something you found elsewhere that someone else developed, and you think it's perfect for your customer base, or of course taking a game of your own and licensing it out to others, which broadens your sales without actually doing the work of distributing the game within a particular country and localizing it and doing all that other work that's involved with it. So French publisher Cocktail Games has had huge success and is often geared toward localization and licensing of different games. So if you go back in time, they published lots of little games in metal tins. So Tokyo Train and Rhythm and Boulé were licensed by Playroom Entertainment in the 2000s and had their own editions. And Speech came out in different, like half dozen different editions from Blue Orange Games. So it was an initial small publication that then was licensed and brought out to a larger market as you add IPs to it. Cocktail Games licensed Pictel, which was released by a Japanese publisher. It's a game where you're putting clear cards with images on them and you're sort of overlaying the images to try to get people to guess what you're building. So sort of a concept, but with clear overlaid cards. Found it in the Japanese market because Cocktails Mathieu Depinot travels around the world, all these different conventions, trying to find things, licensed it, and then lots of other publishers licensed it from there. So another huge success, the one that most people might be familiar with but might not know, is Antoine Bauz's Hanabi, which was originally released by a small French publisher that specializes in a lot of RPGs, Les Deux Saints. I think that's how you pronounce it. So it was initially released as a 2-game package with Hanabi and Ikebana. Well, Cocktail saw this, remarketed the game as Hanabi, published it on their own in France, even though Les Deux Saints is a French company. And then that version of Hanabi was licensed out to all sorts of other companies, including Abacus Spiele, which won Spiel des Jahres for it. And then this version, if you want to look at the back of the box, well, you have the original publisher of Les Deux Saints, and then Cocktail Games, and then R&R Games licensed it from Cocktail for release in the US, and then Spin Master further licensed it for this mass market edition that showed up in Target. So you have one design that went through many different hands, broadening the scope of that game every time it was released. It's fascinating to see that sort of behind the scenes element that then plays a role in which games show up on your shelves. So not every Cocktail release gets that wide appeal. Here's this game that's based on French political parties, Comme des Sardines. Nope, that did not get released. Oh, there's my title, my game that I released. Not licensed. So sad. Cocktail Games has an ongoing relationship with Gamewright, with which it's released a number of titles both back and forth. So Cocktail did the French versions of Forbidden Island, Gamewright did the English versions of Twin It, and now the game I'm talking about today, finally getting to the point, Whozit, a game by Romeric Gallonier that was originally released by Cocktail under the name Profiler, because what you were doing in this party game is one player is going to be the active player for the round, the profiler. They're looking at 6 characters that are put out, and they are trying to make you guess which character they have in mind. And they do that by laying out clues. Here are the components in Whozit. You have a score track on which you'll move this pawn over the 5 rounds of the game. You have some components numbered 1 to 10. You generally don't use 7 to 10, so we'll put those aside for now. The cards 1 to 6, we'll put those aside for the moment. You have a deck of 100 character cards, and those cards are double-sided. So you can put out the regular generic version, which is more a role, or you can put out a specific person. So the active player for the rounds is Dentist or Joan of Arc. Let's do that. Comic book nerd. I'll definitely put that. I won't even look at the other side. Daenerys Targaryen, and a Navy SEAL or Martin Luther King Jr. Put out Navy SEAL. So you put out the 6 characters, you shuffle these cards numbered 1 to 6. I choose one of them, and I don't show anyone else, but this is the character that I am trying to get you to guess. When you look at the number to figure out who you're supposed to get other people to guess, ideally you do not look at that character right away, but I've seen people do it repeatedly over the 5 games that I've played. So ideally when you look at the number, hide your eyes, look at those characters, know who you're trying to get people to guess, but don't just give it away immediately. You have to use the clues to give it away. So you draw 2 clue cards that are double-sided, and you decide which side of the clue you want to use for the character you're trying to get them to guess, and you place them on the clue meter at the appropriate stage. So when I place down the card, I can show you the other side. I would like to be stranded on a desert island with them, or has shoplifted. Which, I'll say definitely has shoplifted. I wish they were my parent, or would make it to the semifinals of America's Got Talent. Well, we'll say that. Okay, so based on those 2 clues, you have to figure out, who am I talking about in here? Who has definitely shoplifted, and who do I maybe wish were my parent out of the whole lens here? Well, you have to decide. Everyone else then debates. You talk about, well, who do they think I'm really picking, and who definitely does not fit into this category here? Knowing Eric, do you think that they wish the Queen of England were his parent or his mom? Do I want the Queen of England for my mom? Do I like the publicity like that? Do I think the Queen has shoplifted? No, the Queen is definitely not shoplifted, right? So everyone decides, nope, the Queen, we're going to vote off the island, as it were. It's not the Queen, right? And if I agree that my character on this card, my number here, 1 to 6, is not the Queen of England, you move ahead on the track. Okay, great. Super. Let's continue. Olympic athlete? Maybe. Joan of Arc? Well, I don't know what stores were like in her time, but you can imagine her in the modern day. Comic book nerd? Probably a shoplifted. Do I wish they were my parents? Well, that depends on how much you know about me and my love of comics. So, Daenerys Targaryen? Did she shoplift? Probably not. So we're going to say no. We don't think that. Also, she might be a very strict parent, burning her children. So, no, that is correct. And you keep removing options until either you have only one character that remains, the correct character, based on the card here, and if so, you'll reach this endpoint, or you reveal that person early, at which point the round ends and we don't score anything else. You just leave the token where it is. That's the first round of the game. Ideally, you have some idea of who I'm talking about, and you would argue with other people and you'd play it out. And of course, if you guess incorrectly, then is it your fault or is it my fault for figuring out where the clues are going on the track? And that's sort of the elements of a party game that everyone likes, is that conversational aspect. It's the creating of an experience beyond strictly the scoring of the game. Whozit has those elements. Profiler worked the same way. There are some differences between the two, and I'll talk about those in a moment, but that's the nature of the game. You're going to be looking at the characters and arguing a little bit and having this little social experience. So let's look at another round. Whoever is the active player for the round determines how they want to put out the cards. We look at this, and we got Pablo Picasso and Vincent van Gogh. Do we want 2 artists out like this? What is my audience like? Are they going to be able to distinguish between the two in a reasonable manner, and am I going to be able to give clues to help distinguish them? If not, maybe I just go with Park Ranger, or I just throw the card out and use something else. So I decide what I'm going to do. Definitely. We've noticed that with the specific characters, usually it's a little easier to give clues just because people have more of a context there rather than making up some stereotypical nun profile or Park Ranger profile. But, you do what you like. Would be difficult to kidnap. Ooh, I should first figure out who I'm trying to give a clue for. So look at this again. Put this out. Makes her bed every morning. Has slept in the gutter. I will say probably not made their bed every morning, and definitely would be difficult to kidnap. Oh, based on those clues, who am I talking about? There's all sorts of different reasons for why you might pick someone, but you'll carry on. We scored only 3 points in the first round, but we'll add our score. If you had a perfect score in every round, you would hit the end of the track. So first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, and you get to Whozit. Well, we only scored 3 points. We'll see how far we get in this round. The score track is the main difference between Profiler and Whozit. Profiler lasted 5 rounds, and each of the 5 rounds was identical, where you lay out 6 cards, you get 2 clues, you put them on the track, and you will score points, 0 to 5 points in each round. 0 if you guess the wrong person immediately, 5 if you eliminate everyone else and just end up with the chosen person. So you're going to end up with some score between 0 and 25. And then if you play the game again, you can compare the score for that game with the previous game. So that's one way to do it. Gamewright went a different way, and it's interesting to compare the two design philosophies behind the releases, whether it's you're looking at the French-American market and how those respond differently, or is it just the publisher desire and what they want to present to people. So it's interesting to look at the differences between the two. So again, Profiler, 5 rounds, score 0 to 25. You look at the score track for the Whozit, presents a different picture of the game. As I said, if you get a perfect score every round, you will hit the end of the tracks. If you don't, though, you might end up in some number range here. And if you end up with 8 as you're going into the 5th round, instead of laying out the numbers 1 to 6, you will actually lay out 1 to 8. And you will give 8 choices, and you'll use the cards 1 to 8 to make it harder for you, but it also makes it possible to reach the end of the track for the Whozit score. Rather than scoring meh or not bad or pretty good or whatever, or here, if you land here, you scored nothing, essentially. There's no scoring track. There's only meh to Whozit. And if you don't reach 10 by the end of the 4th round, then the rules say just advance to 10. And then you'll use numbers 1 to 10, and you'll have 10 choices in the final round, which will still give you a chance, if you get everything correct, to get to Whozit. While Profiler is score-based, with you getting a score 0 to 25 and you being able to compare those over multiple games, Gamewright seems to have you shooting for the mountain with everything else being unacceptable. Whatever happens in the first 4 rounds of the game, just move up to 10. Right? If you're terrible, just move up to 10 and you'll still get a chance to get Whozit. That's the important thing, that peak score. Everything else doesn't matter because there's no numbers on the score track. It's the end spot or it's nothing, essentially. Yeah, sure, there's so close and meh and other scores, but the way that the game is set up, it has you shooting for that Whozit at the end of the track. And it feels a little different from the way that I would imagine Profiler would play out. Since, of course, Profiler, you get a score, but you try to do the best you can in every round, and that all matters over the course of the game. Whereas Gamewright sets it up so that the first 4 rounds are somewhat optional. You can ace them, and then you'll have the best chance of doing well in the 5th round, in theory, because you'll have only 6 characters available instead of up to 10. But it still feels like a bit of a cheat. It was a little frustrating playing this in our first game when, after 4 rounds, we had not reached 10, and I looked at the rules, and they're just like, yep, just move up to 10. Just whatever. It felt like a weird gimme, like it was taking away something from what I was trying to do, and it seemed like there was a better way to do this. If that's your goal, if your goal is to achieve perfection in the 5th round, which is effectively what Whozit is like now, it seemed like there should be a better way to do that where the earlier rounds matter more and there'll be more of an arc of the game. So Profiler doesn't have an arc. You have 5 independent rounds and then you just add up those scores over the 5 rounds. So it's the social experience without a longer game arc, something that you're building towards, something that generally you think you would want to have in a game, where the early choices matter as you go later into the game. Gamewright sort of added that because, again, you're trying to reach that final spot on the track, but again, the first 4 rounds are sort of a throwaway at the same time. So, is there a better way to do this? And I think there is. So here's the Eric Martin variant for Whozit. The rounds play mostly the same way in my variant, except you get rid of the scoreboard. You don't need it at all. The scoreboard is going to be kept by the cards themselves because you are going to play the same way as before. You put out 6 characters, you have 2 clues, you put them on the clue meter, and then people are going to guess. Would be difficult, definitely the kidnap. That's probably not true of a nun, correct? And if that's correct, you remove that card from play. Vincent van Gogh, Yoda definitely be difficult to kidnap. The Godfather as well. Angelina Jolie probably has some sort of security detail. Probably does not make her bed every morning. That's Yoda. I don't even know if he has a real bed. We have to imagine that character. So you go around. You could kidnap Van Gogh, I'm sure. Correct. Okay, we remove that. So we get down to a certain number of cards, and let's say you get these 2, and then you guess out of these 2 it's the Godfather, and that is incorrect. The Godfather was actually my choice for the round. So in that case, you take these 2 cards, and you set these 2 cards aside. And then you begin another round where you turn up 6 new cards, you play again, putting out the clues, and let's say you get this one correct, so you have only 1 card left. Oh, the player to the clue giver is right. You continue playing this way until either you complete 4 rounds or you have set aside 10 or more cards. In the latter case, if you have 10 or more cards, you say, okay, we move to the final round. You shuffle the cards, you discard until you have only 10, and then you lay out those 10, and you have to ace that round in order to win. If that's not the case, you get through 4 rounds and you have fewer than 10 cards, well, again, you lay out those cards and you play that final round. And it gives you better odds if you have done better in the first 4 rounds of the game. If you have aced those first 4 rounds, in fact, you have only 4 cards left, the 4 particular chosen characters in those first 4 rounds. And that gives you great odds of winning, or better odds of winning the final round, because you have fewer wrong choices available to you. What's more, the game builds because you are reusing the characters from the first 4 rounds. So you already have some clues associated with them, whatever was used in those rounds, and now you're bringing them out again. And maybe one of those correct choices is going to be the correct choice again, but now with different clues that are kind of playing off the earlier clues of the game. Maybe it'll be one of the other characters that was mistakenly chosen and that was also put aside with the other correct characters. So you're bringing back the characters for another go. Something you might think of when you play Time's Up, where the fun of that game is often that you have clues that build over multiple rounds as a character appears again and again and again. It's not quite the same in Whozit because you don't bring characters back more than twice. And they might not even have a clue associated with them. Maybe they're just dragged along. But I played 3 games under the rules published by GameRight, and I played 2 games with my variant, and we played with 2 to 5 players. And I really enjoy my variant because it provides a storyline for the game. You doing well in the earlier parts of the game matter for that last round, more than just put out a number of cards and hopefully you'll make it. But now the characters are coming back and you build on things, and it just provides a more satisfying experience. So, different ways to play. You can use that or not as you wish. There's one other difference between Profiler and Whozit. Here's the clue meter from Whozit along with a number of the clues in the game. The interesting thing looking at these clues is some of them are very specific. It's a all or nothing thing. Loves nature. Has a tattoo. I'm a fan of theirs. Is a stickler for details. Has picked their nose. Those are things that are kind of yes or no. And then you have a bunch of clues that are usually has a smile on their face. Visits the spa frequently. Flosses regularly. These sort of qualified clues. Well, on the clue meter, you have 7 different possibilities, ranging from definitely down to definitely not. And sometimes these clues mix oddly with the clue meter, because you have something like frequently the butt of the joke, but probably not. So how does the probably and the frequently combine together in terms of you explaining that? It's probably not true that they are frequently the butt of the joke. So is that infrequently? It's not never, because that's definitely not, but definitely not frequently. It's hard to parse that a little. The clue meter and profiler does not use words, definitely, probably not, but instead just uses numbers. +5 down to -5. And that's it. You have 11 choices instead of 7 in Whozit, but the main difference is that it's just a number degree of how much you agree or disagree with whatever the clue is. When you're adding in the words, definitely not flosses regularly. Does that mean they floss infrequently, or they never floss, or how does this work? It adds this layer of complication, having the linguistic element in there that you have to decipher to try to determine what the clue giver, the profiler, is trying to communicate to you. So it adds this little barrier where, as we were playing, we would get some of these odd conditional clues that we would have to talk about again and again with the people who are trying to guess. So by this, they mean not regularly flossing. It's infrequent flossing. And we're trying to find the person who is the infrequent flosser, and then we have to set them aside and not consider them, but consider everyone else. Okay. So it's more layers to the game rather than just being able to more easily identify who you think the profiler is talking about, sort of put a halo around them, and then who is outside their concentric circles. That's visually how I think of the game. Is you've got a character, you have these overlapping clue circles with that character right in the middle of both of them, and then who is least likely to fit inside those circles. And that's the visual way I often think of games. That's how it comes up. But with the words, it's getting in my way. Rather than with the numbers, it feels like it gives me a better way to visualize this. I don't know if I need necessarily 11 choices. The choice between +4 or +3 in terms of flossing regularly, it's kind of a hard gradation to make, and I'm not sure how you would do that. And I'm not sure what the clues are in French, because I've not looked at the French version. But again, these are the little differences you spot as you see from one edition to the other. And it's kind of interesting to think about how publishers customize a game for their market and what they are kind of saying about their audience with the presentation of the game. Aside from that, now you know how to play Whozit, and you can go figure out for yourself whether you are the person who is playing this game.